Pi is one of the most famous numbers in all of mathematics. You may have seen it written as the symbol pi, but what does it mean and why do so many people talk about it? Pi is a special number. It comes from circles. If you draw a circle and measure the distance around the outside, that is called a circumference. If you measure the distance across the middle of the circle, that is called a diameter. When you divide the circumference by the diameter, you always get the same number. That number is pi. It does not matter how big or small the circle is. A tiny coin and a giant will both give you the same answer when you divide the circumference by the diameter. The answer is always pi. This is what makes pi so special. It never changes, no matter what circle you use. Pi is approximately 3.14159, but the decimal never stops and never repeats. It goes on forever. 3.141592653589979. No one has ever found the end of pi. Mathematicians have used computers to calculate pi to trillions of digits. Still, there is no pattern and no end. Pi is not a simple fraction. You cannot write it perfectly as a fraction like 1/2 or 3/4. Numbers like this have a special name. They are called irrational numbers. An irrational number cannot be written as a simple fraction, and its decimal goes on forever without repeating. People have been studying pi for thousands of years. Ancient civilizations found it useful for building, farming, and astronomy. Today, scientists and engineers use pi in many important ways. The story of pi is long, exciting, and full of clever people who work hard to understand this one simple but magical number. This is the story of pi. Thousands of years ago, people did not have calculators or computers, but they still needed to build things. They needed to make round columns, round pots, and round wells. To do this, they had to work with circles. And when you work with circles, you need pi. The earliest written records of pi come from two ancient civilizations. One was Babylon, in the area that is now the country of Iraq. The other was Egypt, in the northeastern corner of Africa. Both of these civilizations figured out an approximate value for pi a very long time ago. The people of Babylon use a value of about 3.125 for pi. We know this because of clay tablets found by archaeologists. These tablets were written more than 3,700 years ago. The Babylonians used this number to calculate the area of circles. It was not perfectly accurate, but it was close enough for their building projects. The Egyptians had their own approximation too. There's a very old document called the Rhine Mathematical Papyrus. It was written by a scribe named Ames around 1650 BC. This papyrus contains math problems and solutions. One of the problems gives a method to calculate the area of a circle. When you work out the method, you find that the Egyptians were using a value of approximately 3.1605 for pi. Both the Babylonian and Egyptian values are not perfectly correct, but they're surprisingly close to the real value of 3.14159. For people who lived thousands of years ago with no modern tools, this was a remarkable achievement. They were smart observers and careful thinkers. These early approximations of pi show that humans have always been curious about circles and the numbers that describe them. The search for pi had only just begun. The ancient Greeks loved mathematics. They asked big questions about numbers, shapes, and the world around them. One of the biggest questions was, what is the exact value of pi? Many Greek thinkers worked on this problem, but one man came closer than anyone before him. His name was Archimedes. Archimedes lived in the city of Syracuse, on the island of Sicily, in the 3rd century BC. He was one of the greatest mathematicians who ever lived. Around 250 BC, he found a clever way to calculate pi more accurately than anyone had before. His method was based on polygons. A polygon is a shape with straight sides, like a triangle or a square. Archimedes imagined drawing a circle. Then he drew a polygon inside the circle and another polygon outside the circle. The circle was always between the two polygons. He knew that the circumference of the circle had to be bigger than the inside polygon and smaller than the outside polygon. By calculating the sizes of both polygons, he could find a range that contained the true value of pi. Archimedes started with simple polygons, like hexagons that have 6 sides. Then he kept adding more sides. He went from 6 sides to 12, then 24, then 48, and finally to 96 sides. The more sides a polygon had, the closer it looked like a circle. This gave him a much more accurate estimate of pi. After all this work, Archimedes found that pi was between 3 and 10^71 and 3 and 1/7. In decimal form, this means pi is between about 3.1408 and 3.1429. The true value is 3.14159, so he was very close. This method was groundbreaking. It gave mathematics a precise, logical way to think about pi. Archimedes showed the world that careful thinking could unlock the secrets of numbers. While the Greeks were working on pi in Europe, mathematicians in other parts of the world were also studying this important number. In Asia, 2 great civilizations, China and India, made their own important discoveries about pi. In ancient China, mathematicians were very practical. They wanted to use numbers to solve real problems. One of the most famous early Chinese mathematicians was Lu Hui. He lived in the 3rd century AD, around the year 263. He used a method similar to Archimedes. He drew polygons inside a circle and kept increasing the number of sides. Lu Hui used a polygon with 3,072 sides. This gave him a very accurate value of pi, approximately 3.14159. This was remarkably accurate for someone working over 1,700 years ago with no modern tools. About 200 years later, another Chinese mathematician named Zhu Chongji made an even more impressive achievement. He calculated pi to 7 decimal places, 3.1415926. He also found a very useful fraction to represent pi, 355/113. This fraction is accurate to 6 decimal places. It was so good that it was not beaten in Europe for many centuries. In India, mathematicians were also making great progress. The ancient Indian text called the Aryabhatiya, written by the mathematician Aryabhata around 499 AD, gave an approximation of pi as 3.1416. Aryabhata wrote that this value was approximate, which shows he understood that pi could not be expressed exactly as a simple fraction. Later Indian mathematicians continued this work. The Kerala school of mathematics in southern India even developed early methods to calculate pi to many decimal places using infinite series. The work done in China and India shows that the search for pi was truly a global effort. People on different continents, working independently, were all drawn to the mystery of this remarkable number. After the great civilizations of Greece, China, and India, a new era of mathematics began. From around the 7th to the 13th century AD, the Islamic world became the center of science and learning. Scholars in cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Samarkand collected knowledge from all over the world and built on it. During this time, mathematicians made important advances in the study of pi. One of the most important contributions came from a Persian mathematician named Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi. He lived in the 9th century and worked in the famous House of Wisdom in Baghdad. This was a great library and center of learning. Al-Khwarizmi is often called the father of algebra. He used pi in many of his calculations about circles and spheres. Islamic mathematicians also translated the works of Greek scholars like Archimedes into Arabic. By doing this, they preserved these ideas and made them available to future generations. Without this work, much of Greek mathematics might have been lost forever. Another important scholar was al-Biruni, who lived around 1000 AD. He was a brilliant scientist and mathematician. He used calculations to measure the circumference of the Earth, and his work required an accurate value of pi. His work showed how pi was essential not just for pure mathematics, but also for understanding the physical world. The Islamic scholars also worked on trigonometry, which is the mathematics of angles and triangles. Trigonometry is deeply connected to pi. The values of sine and cosine, which are used in trigonometry, are all based on the properties of circles. Improving the understanding of trigonometry meant improving the understanding of pi. This period was a golden age for mathematics. The Islamic world kept the torch of knowledge burning and helped pass the ideas of pi to Europe, where the next chapter of the story would take place. After the Islamic Golden Age, the knowledge of mathematics slowly spread into Europe. During the Renaissance, which began in the 14th century, Europeans became very interested in science, art, and learning. Mathematicians started working on harder and harder problems. The challenge of calculating pi to more decimal places became a famous pursuit. One of the first great European calculators of pi was a German mathematician named Ludolf van Sullen. He lived from 1540 to 1610. He spent a large part of his life calculating pi, using a method similar to Archimedes. He worked with polygons that had a huge number of sides. Ludolf van Sullen calculated pi to 35 decimal places. This was an amazing achievement for someone doing all the work by hand. He was so proud of this work that when he died, his 35-digit value of pi was engraved on his tombstone. Because of this dedication, pi was sometimes called the Ludolphine number in Germany for many years. Around the same time, other European mathematicians were finding new ways to calculate pi. They discovered that you could write pi as an infinite series. An infinite series is a sum of many numbers that goes on forever. If you add up enough terms of a series, you get closer and closer to the true value of pi. In 1593, a French mathematician named François Vite found one of the first infinite product formulas to represent pi. A few decades later, the English mathematician John Wallis found another infinite product formula for pi. These formulas were exciting because they gave mathematicians a completely new tool to work with. The Renaissance was a time of great energy and curiosity. Mathematicians were pushing the boundaries of what was known, and pi was one of the great puzzles they were determined to solve. Today, everyone knows the symbol pi. It is the Greek letter pi, but it was not always used to represent this special number. For thousands of years, mathematicians described pi using words or other symbols. The story of how pi became the standard symbol is an interesting part of the history of pi. The first person to use the Greek letter pi to represent the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter was a Welsh mathematician named William Jones. He used this symbol in a book he published in 1706. Jones chose the letter pi because it is the first letter of the Greek word perimetros, which means perimeter or circumference. However, the symbol did not become famous right away. At first, only a few mathematicians used it. The real change came because of a very important mathematician named Leonhard Euler. Euler was Swiss and lived from 1707 to 1783. He is considered one of the greatest mathematicians in all of history. Euler loved using the symbol pi in his writing. He used it in his famous papers and books. Because he was so respected and so widely read, other mathematicians started using the symbol too. By the middle of the 18th century, pi had become the standard symbol used by mathematicians all over the world. We still use it today because of Euler's great influence. Euler also made many important contributions to understanding pi. He proved a beautiful equation that connected pi with other important mathematical constants. The equation is often called Euler's identity. It states that pi plus 1 equals 0. This connects 5 of the most important numbers in mathematics, pi, 1, and 0. Many mathematicians consider it one of the most beautiful equations ever discovered. Euler's work made pi even more important and gave it the symbol the whole world now recognizes. By the 17th and 18th centuries, mathematicians had found a powerful new way to calculate pi. This method used something called infinite series. An infinite series is a very long addition problem. You keep adding smaller and smaller numbers together, and the sum slowly gets closer and closer to pi. One of the most famous infinite series for pi was discovered by the German mathematician Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz in 1673. His formula is simple and beautiful. You start with 1, then subtract 1/3, then add 1/5, then subtract 1/7. And you keep going forever. The sum of all these fractions, going on forever, equals pi divided by 4. If you multiply the final sum by 4, you get pi. The Leibniz formula is elegant, but it has a problem. It takes a very long time to work. You have to add thousands of terms before you get a good approximation of pi. It is not very efficient. Other mathematicians found better series. In 1706, the English mathematician John Mackien found a smarter formula. It used the arctangent function and worked much faster. Using his formula, Mackien was able to calculate pi to 100 decimal places by hand. This was a record at the time. Over the next 2 centuries, mathematicians found even better formulas. Some of the most powerful came from a brilliant Indian mathematician named Srinivasa Ramanujan, who lived from 1887 to 1920. Ramanujan had almost no formal training, but his mind was extraordinary. He found astonishing formulas for pi that were far more powerful than anything known before. His formulas are still used in computer calculations of pi today. Infinite series opened a door to a new world. Pi was no longer just about circles and geometry. It became a number that lived deep inside the heart of pure mathematics itself. For most of human history, calculating the digits of pi was a slow and difficult task. It was done by hand, using pen, paper, and enormous patience. But in the 20th century, everything changed. Computers arrived, and the race to calculate more and more digits of pi became truly possible. The The first electronic computers were built in the 1940s. Scientists quickly realized that computers could calculate pi with incredible speed. In 1949, a team of mathematicians used a computer called ENIAC to calculate pi to 2,037 decimal places. This calculation took 70 hours. Before computers, reaching even 1,000 digits had taken years of human effort. As computers became faster and more powerful, the record for known digits of pi kept growing. By 1973, mathematicians had calculated pi to 1 million decimal places. By the 1980s, the record had reached hundreds of millions of digits. By the early 2000s, it had passed 1 billion digits. Two famous champions of calculating pi were Yasamasa Kaneda, Japan, and later Shigeru Kondo. In 2011, Shigeru Kondo used a personal computer to calculate pi to 10 trillion decimal places. This record showed just how powerful modern computers had become. A more recent record was set in 2022 by a team at Google. They calculated pi to 100 trillion decimal places. This is an almost unimaginably large number. If you try to read 100 trillion digits at 1 digit per second, it would take more than 3 million years. But why do people want so many digits of pi? In most practical uses, just a few digits are enough. For scientists, 40 digits of pi are more than enough to calculate the circumference of the observable universe with extreme accuracy. The quest for more digits is mostly a celebration of human curiosity and the amazing power of computers. After thousands of years, pi is still one of the most important numbers in the world. It is not just used in math class. It appears in science, engineering, technology, and even medicine. Understanding pi helps us understand the world we live in. Engineers use pi every day. When they design bridges, buildings, tunnels, and machines, they work with circles and curves. Calculating the strength of a round column or the size of a circular pipe requires pi. Without pi, modern engineering would not be possible. Scientists also depend on pi. Physicists use pi in equations that describe waves, electricity, and gravity. Astronomers use pi to calculate the orbits of planets and the distances between stars. Even in biology, pi appears in the study of circular cells and the natural shapes of living organisms. In technology, pi is everywhere. The signals that carry phone calls, music, and internet data are described by wave equations that use pi. The design of computer chips, cameras, and GPS systems all involve calculations with pi. Every time you use a smartphone, you are benefiting from pi. Pi also appears in statistics and probability. Surprisingly, pi shows up in formulas that describe random events and normal distributions. This happens because pi is connected to circles, and circles appear in many unexpected places in mathematics. Pi is also a cultural symbol. It represents the beauty and mystery of mathematics. Every year on March 14th, people around the world celebrate Pi Day because the date March 14th matches the first 3 digits of pi, 3.14. Schools hold fun events. People bake round pies, and mathematicians give talks about the history of this famous number. Pi started as a practical tool for ancient builders. Today, it is a symbol of human curiosity and the endless wonder of mathematics. The story of pi is really the story of human thinking itself, always searching for deeper understanding.